Hi, and welcome to this yoga talk. I'm Kate Rosette. I'm the founder of Yoga Branches. I'm a certified Iyengar yoga teacher, and my passion is to bring yoga to you, whether it be at home doing physical asana poses or the philosophy, which is what I'll be talking about today. So, today I would like to talk about Abhyasa and Vairagya, the two pillars of yoga, effort and surrender, and how these come into play in our practice. Everything I like to talk about, I like to relate back to our home yoga practice and to make it practical and something tangible that you can begin to work with. So, these two pillars, Abhyasa and Vairagya, effort and surrender, are at the foundation of our practice. And I want to talk about how that is today. So, just to get us all first on the same page about what is yoga and what is yoga if it's not just asana, if it's not just a physical practice, what is it? Yes, it has similarities to physical exercise. It requires physical exertion, it promotes health and well-being, and by doing the poses, we have similar benefits and similarities to just doing exercise. But there's much more to it than that, than just the physical side. So as well as having the physical component, the asana, yoga is also a spiritual practice. It's rooted in spiritual tradition and thousands of years of Hinduism, and the philosophy is as equally as important as the physical poses. So, knowing that, and just that kind of leads me to give a little introduction to that philosophy and where it comes from, and how we are able to practice it today and introduce it into our practice today is through Patanjali, who was a sage or a scholar who's been credited to writing the Yoga Sutras, which are 196 aphorisms, little bundles, little packages of information. An aphorism is like one or two lines, these little sentences that need to be unpacked. And when they're unpacked, we can comprehend or understand a much deeper layer of the yoga. And so through the 196 aphorisms, the Yoga Sutras, we practice yoga today. And each sutra unravels something. And there's the sutras about Vairagya and Abhyasa, the effort and surrender. So I want to keep today's talk practical and tangible, but in order to get there, I do need to give a little bit more of the background of the philosophy, and I'm going to touch on one of the Yoga Sutras. So the Yoga Sutra 1.2 states, and you'll have to excuse my Sanskrit pronunciation because I haven't studied Sanskrit, so I really don't know how to say it, but I'm going to give it my best shot. The Yoga Sutra 1.2 states, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which translates as yoga is the cessation of the movements of the consciousness. So consciousness is our awareness. It's made up of our mind, our intelligence, our ego. The vrittis are the fluctuations of consciousness, otherwise known as the many thousands of thoughts that are coming and going all of the time. And the yoga is the restraint, the ceasing of the busyness of the mind, the fluctuations of the mind. So this is Sutra 1.2. So if we understand that yoga, the intention of yoga is to quieten the mind and to bring awareness and mindfulness, let's now look at how that plays out, if that's the philosophy, how that plays out in our actual practice. So practicing yoga asana without the philosophy is just a physical thing. It's just, stretching and moving the body and physical. But once we apply the philosophy and we have the two moving along on the same train track the whole way, then we can call it yoga with the philosophy and the asana. And it's, there's many limbs of yoga. There's the asana, and there's the pranayam, and the uh, Svadhyaya, the self-study, and the study of the self and the text. So all of these run parallel to each other and make up the whole scheme of yoga. So how does ceasing the fluctuations of the mind play out in the daily practice that we do on our sticky mats? Essentially, how it works is when we're doing the asana, particularly when we're in a class and the teacher's giving us lots of instructions and keeping our mind on all the small, intricate parts of our body, from our big toe to our kneecap to our outer hip, in that process of focusing the mind on the parts of the body, we're staying focused. Our mind is connecting with our body, and it's got no chance to do anything else. The mind is staying with each part of the body, and this is bringing one-centeredness with the mind, and it quietens the mind and focuses the mind. And as a result, we stop the busy fluctuations of the mind, because there's no chance for the mind to be distracted by the stimulation of the outside world when we're focusing on one thing during the poses, applying ourselves, concentrating, because they're hard to get into, and the teacher's efforts at using instructions to keep our mind there. So there's a few things at play that are keeping us focused and quietening our minds in that practice of the asana. So with the practice of the asana, with the mind focusing on the actions of the pose and staying present there and not being distracted by the outside stimulus, we are learning to look inwards and to curb the fluctuations of the mind, to curb that monkey mind that's constantly like a hamster on a wheel spinning. And that's why after the practice we feel so good. We feel much calmer, much more quiet, much more at peace and relaxed, because the mind hasn't been going over and over and over. So in terms of bringing this back to the two pillars of yoga, Abhyasa and Vairagya, effort and surrender, it requires a lot of effort to do this. In the yoga class, effort has to be applied to keep our mind focused. Effort has to be applied to get ourselves into the physical poses. This word effort, or abhyasa, translates, often the translation is defined as constant practice over a long period of time. And I want to quote from Light on the Yoga Sutras by Iyengar. And he says, "It is the art of learning that which has to be learned through cultivation and disciplined action. This involves long, zealous, calm, and persevering effort." So we understand abhyasa, or effort, to be discipline, zealous practice, intentional effort, intentional gain. So this practical sense that abhyasa, in a practical sense, abhyasa is effort. You need to apply effort in your practice, discipline in your practice, applying yourself with zeal and with devotion and consistent practice is the practice of abhyasa. That is why abhyasa is so important in establishing a home yoga practice. Without effort, the practice is distracted. It's kind of just moving our limbs and our bodies from one pose to another, flopping over a bolster, shifting here. The mind's distracted. People come in, they talk. This happens, that happens. And we don't stay quiet and within. If you're going out and this is your practice, then you're not practicing abhyasa. It's just doing something physical on the mat and moving about. And this is why abhyasa is so important in establishing a home practice, because it really does require that intention to stay mindful and to stay aware and to apply yourself with discipline to the art of yoga and to practicing your yoga. I often say, when you're on the mat, make sure you're doing yoga, not just moving into different shapes. So staying mindful and aware on the mat. really brings the Abhyasa down to its a basic practical application in your home yoga practice. And through that, we bear the fruits of it. There's so much to be gained from a practice that is mindful, aware, quiet, engaged. This is what brings the quiet mind, the calmness. And then we begin to be able to apply that off the mat and in our everyday lives. So I want to finish up now with talking about Vairagya, the other pillar of surrender, and how that comes into play with Abhyasa. If we need to have so much discipline and zeal and effort in our practice, how does the Vairagya come into that? How do they marry? It seems like they're polar opposites. So the Sutra 1.12 states, practice and detachment, so effort and detachment, are the means to still the movements of consciousness. And so it is with the practice and the effort, as well as the detachment, that we can quieten the mind. Vairagya translates as detachment or dispassion or renunciation. And in the practical sense, because I always want to bring it back to something practical and tangible for you in your practice, Vairagya is the observing of oneself. It's the inward looking, that stillness and quiet that is experienced, whether it be experienced after the class or it's something you're experiencing during the asana. It can be practiced in different forms. And I want to talk about perhaps two examples of where you might be able to relate to the practice of Vairagya in your own experience. The first is that perhaps at the beginning of a class, the teacher will invite you to, when you're lying down before the class starts, to bring your awareness to your limbs, your gross body, your arms, your legs, and they bring your awareness to your body lying there on the mat. And to quieten the mind from the outside world, and then from the gross body to the organs of perception, to quietening the organs of perception, the eyes, the taste, the nose, the ears, the senses being quietened and withdrawn inwards. So our inward journey begins right here when you first get on the mat and the teacher is inviting you to practice Vairagya, that inward looking. And by starting there, then once you move into the asana, there's already an internalness, there's already a quietening and a turning off from the outside stimulation. So this in itself is the beginnings of Vairagya and practicing Vairagya and surrender. And another way that you might experience it or start to look at in your practice is when you are in an asana. So we do action and effort to get into a pose and to get into an asana. And then when we're there, we can look in, we observe. And that observement is not so much with judgment. There is no judgment. It is purely an observation, as if there's like a video camera filming and looking. And it's, what do you see? So you might see that you're really struggling there or applying a lot of effort there, but at the same time, there's no life or awareness in another part of the body. So it's that observation and looking and observing, what am I doing? I'm in this pose. What is happening? Where am I applying myself? Where am I slacking off? Or where is the sleep? What is not alive? What is happening? Where is my strength? Where is my weakness? That sort of thing. And then there's an opportunity to repose and to take the shape again, making adjustments based on your observation, based on your practice of surrender and Vairagya, of the looking inwards. So that is just beginning to scratch the surface of Abhyasa and Vairagya, and how the two pillars of yoga are present all the time in our practice of asana. And now that you've got this little bit more understanding, to be mindful of it, to be aware, to notice when it's hard to get on the mat, how you have to be disciplined and apply yourself and apply effort and be zealous. And then when you're in the pose, it's not all effort and go, go, go. There has to be moments of stopping, pausing, observing, looking within, and practicing Vairagya. So, good luck with looking into those two pillars in your practice. Namaste.